The House Appropriations Subcommittee on Human Services will come to order. Clerk, please take the roll.
Chair Roth,
Here.
Representative Kelly,
Here.
Representative Mueller,
Here.
Representative Beeson,
Here.
Representative DeSanta,
Here.
Representative Edwards,
Here.
Representative Longjohn.
Here.
Mr. Chair, all members are present.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Thank you all for being here, by the way. I appreciate this. I know not all things are happening this week, but we are, so thank you. We're going to have Representative Kelly. He's going to approve the minutes of March 18th. Without any objections, the minutes will be approved. Thank you, sir. Today, we're going to talk a little more about juvenile justice. Got a lot to talk about yet, so let's have that conversation. Cameron Clark from Family Court Administration of Leelanau Family Court will be first. Cameron, come on up. When you're ready, push the red button and give us some more information.
And the last shall be first. That was I was last time I was here, and time was tight, and I was talking probably way too fast.
You got time, sir? Let her have it.
This, for me, this is a real passionate thing. This, the issue of juvenile justice in Michigan. I've been doing this since '92. That's 1992, and I've always been in the northern area, Manistee County, Benzie County, and now Leelanau County. And for all those years, we have struggled to get services up in the northern part. And I spoke to you about that last time, and I don't want to berate that. You all understand that north of US 10, it is a services desert, really, for children. We have a difficult time finding professionals to work with our kids in their communities. With the exception of perhaps Grand Traverse County, which is kind of a hotbed now for people to move and enjoy the lifestyle up there, which is why we've chosen that county as our area for our facility that I spoke to you about last time. I thought I'd spend a little bit of time today, though, talking about some of the roadblocks to not just northern Michigan, but in a statewide fashion, some of the issues that are prohibiting kids from getting the types of treatment that they need. So there's a system in place currently through the Department of Health and Human Services that a court would have to refer a child to a department within the department, and that department decides where that child should best be treated. It's a bit cumbersome, and there is no representation on that committee from the courts themselves. It is strictly state driven, and they kind of sit on their high throne and tell us what's best for our kids. They don't even know our kids usually, and that's not just in Leelanau County or Grand Traverse or up at the UP. That's Wayne County as well. And they make these decisions, and then what happens, because the system is so broken right now, is that a kid will stay 6 to 12 months in a detention facility awaiting a bed for treatment. Those are different times of bed. So all that time they're getting they might be getting some education, they might not, but they're aging is what they're doing during that time frame. And there are circumstances around the state in which youth have been in those facilities, those detention facilities, for so long that they've actually aged out of the juvenile court system, and now they're adults. And so then the judge is left with this decision about, well, do I place the child now, this adult now, in a juvenile facility because now there might be a bed open, or do I dismiss this case and let that youth go off my caseload and close the case? That's not a good place to put a judge. So this issue of moving kids through the system, short-term detention is fine. I don't really like the term detention so much as I do, in our case, at least in Northern Michigan, assessment center. We would use that detention time as an opportunity to assess the youth and figure out what needs they really have, and can those needs be best met in the community or outside the community. But we don't really have the opportunity right now. So there's just so many layers to the state system that it really is dying under its own weight. I can give you so many examples of how broken it is, but I don't want to just come here and beat up on the state. They've been given a hand too, and they haven't played it all that well, in my opinion. But they've got their hands full, and the system as it is now could really use help. And one of our solutions is to create a statewide system in which it can benefit not only the 41 northern counties, but all 83 counties, and so that kids are not sitting in detention awaiting placements. I don't know how much time I have, but there are enough beds in this state. There are no beds up north, so we're shipping kids all over the place. Missouri, Tennessee, downstate here, 6, 8, 10 hours away from their homes. That's a problem. But in terms of total number of beds, there are beds available. They're just not being utilized. And the ones that are not being utilized primarily are those that are being run by a county or by a court system itself, not by the state of Michigan, not with a private contract to a private organization. Frankly, I wouldn't put a youth from Leelanau County in some of the facilities that private companies are running in the state. They're just not of quality. But counties and courts have bed space. Ottawa, Ingham, Macomb, Berrien, they have room right now. They could take, for example, last time you heard the issue of the youth who were in the rite of passage program. And you heard testimony from those youth about how well they were doing in that program, and they're being kicked out in just a couple of days of their facility because the state didn't know where to put the kids that they're having to move out of Shawano. Well, there are places for them, and you wouldn't necessarily have to remove those kids that are in the rite of passage program. There are other solutions. They're just not taking them. So I like to see our program for a facility up north as part of a larger picture of this is not just a crisis in northern Michigan. This is a crisis throughout the state of Michigan. And I like to see our part of that as just a piece of the larger solution, which takes into consideration where does a kid live? What are his needs, his or her needs specifically? Because we have the capacity in Michigan now to create facilities that can be particularly specific to whatever that youth's needs are. Might be a sexual offender, right? Might be a domestic violence issue, might be substance abuse or mental health, but we have the beds that could be specified to treat those types of issues so that all kids are not placed in together just in a random fashion. What else do you want to know?
Appreciate it, Cam. What I'm hearing you say is that coordination amongst the state isn't necessarily the best right now. With the coordination with the different groups, how you've worked with the counties, obviously,
Yep.
and how is the communication with the state and the counties? One of the questions I really have is where do you guys get a list of facilities that you can potentially send children to outside the state or in the state? What does that list kind of look like?
Well, I haven't seen it yet. In my 32 years, I've not seen a list like that. However, to give them some credit, they tell us now, just within the last couple of weeks, that this list does exist. I've not seen it yet, but it's supposed to be a list that is updated in real time to show us where beds are. Now, those beds are, that system will be as good as the people who are in those facilities that are updating their bed space. And I would like to be optimistic about that. But let's face it, the people in those facilities are busy, and maybe that's on their agenda to get to today sometime, but it might not be at the top of the agenda. So in real time, it might work. It might. I'm going to take a kind of a wait and see attitude, but I don't know that they have a comprehensive list yet that includes all the different counties. And I'll tell you something else. It's nice to have a list, but when I call places to find a bed for a youth, the first question I hear from the person answering the phone is the child assaultive? And I say, usually, that's why we're placing them, because it's a safety issue. And then it's a deadline. We're not going to take kids who are assaultive. So they only want the good kids. Well, we're not placing the well-behaved children in detention or treatment. We're only placing those who need the service. So I get two answers. One is a child assaultive? And of course, the answer is typically yes. And the other is, I'm sorry, but we're not taking out-of-county youth at this time. That made sense during COVID. We didn't want to spread COVID. I get that. That was 5 years ago. And we're still getting the same answer.
The other question I would have is that the money that flows from the state to the counties for placements and to deal with the youth, does that come through very quickly? Is it a time-consuming mechanism? Do you guys find that there's any issues when getting payment? And does the state come in and say, we want to oversee this also to make sure the money's being spent correctly? Do you see oversight on that?
They do audits. They audit each county's child care fund. My county hasn't been, I shouldn't even say this on tape, but we haven't been audited for a while, which is, oops. But some are audited real frequently, and they're not really auditing the quality of programs that are being put on, because that's not their area of expertise, but they are auditing, are the expenses that we're claiming for reimbursement appropriate as were designated in our child care fund budgets.
Okay.
Yeah.
Question? Representative Longjohn.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you for coming again to provide testimony today. The need to connect information on the kids to the kind of list of beds seems like a potentially complex task where there's going to have to be a lot of different data about whether the kid has a substance misuse disorder or has been violent or things like that. And it's my very rudimentary understanding, please help fill in the gaps that I have, I've only been here 2 months, that there's maybe a data set or a data project in development between HHS and the courts to try and make that matching of data happen in real time, but that maybe they were waiting for federal funding. Is that anything you can speak to? It was with the SCAO, the Court Administrative Office, I think.
Yeah, I'm not able to speak well on that topic, especially in regard to where federal funds are coming through and how they get siphoned into the state and the state budget and the DHHS. I'm sorry.
No problem. Follow-up question is just, how do we know how many beds we need in different regions of the state? Chair Roth, we were trying to follow up on that question that we asked after the end of the last meeting, but still we were trying to figure out how to assess the market, if you will, the need.
Hit the button, that works better. Good question, and the department wasn't available to be here today, but they want to follow up next time. So if you have information on that, go ahead.
Yeah, I can't speak to that on a statewide basis, but I can tell you, and I may have said this last time, up in the northern area in which we're asking for a facility, we did a comprehensive survey of bed need up there, both on the assessment side and the treatment side. And for a 32-bed facility up north, which is what we're asking for, we could fill that facility twice over based on our survey.
Representative Beeson.
Thank you very much. My concern is what you said earlier, and I was talking to with Rep. Mueller. we know that when you put young people together without any desire to get better and just have them in holding, there's nothing good besides groupthink that continues to teach a young person how to communicate with what is going wrong instead of with what is going right. And I'm very familiar with this with people that I hire all the time in this situation where I try to keep them busy so they're not scheming a new plan. So how do you feel that we could fix that just by beds to get them into treatment sooner? Because if you put too many of us together, even at our age, it's sometimes not in the best interest, right? But it is also, I'm being honest, like we learn from our experiences, and our experiences says that how do we fix that? So do you think that by getting them into beds faster will make it so that they're less in the system?
Well, sure, it certainly shortens the amount of time that they're in the system, certainly. But I think what you're talking about are youth who have had several swings and misses already, right? And so it has been decided by a judge and by their behavior that they need treatment. So placing them in a detention facility, waiting and waiting and waiting, there becomes a sense of hopelessness and helplessness with those youth. You're absolutely right. They begin to think, why am I doing anything here? Because I'm not moving at all through this system. I'm not getting any sort of help. I'm just aging. A youth would say, I'm just rotting here.
And I've heard that before. I've heard that it's hard once you get into the system to get out. Yeah. And that's my only concern is how do we fix that?
Yeah. Well, there are ways in terms of if the treatment beds can be realigned so that we have in the state of Michigan some specialized facilities for youth that have specialized needs. That's step one, I believe. But aside from that, when you set up a facility, you don't, like ours would be 32 beds. We're not going to just put 32 kids in a therapy room and say, hey, let's talk about, how. No. They're split up into small groups. 8 is a nice size. 6 to 8 is a great size for doing any sort of treatment and therapy in a group fashion. If you want to put 32 together playing basketball in the gym, that's fine. But when it comes to the hard work that they need to do, they need to be in small group settings or individual settings. And I think that gets to the crux of the issue is that do we have facilities in the state of Michigan that have the capacity to do that and do it well?
Thank you.
Maybe to go off of Timmy's, Representative Beeson's thoughts. I don't know how to ask this quite right, Kim. Is there a diagnosed step for kids to go through the system? Like they go in with very much under secured situation and then they want to get treatment. Is there a prescribed way they move through that system, or it's really up to possibly the facility or the people, the professionals working with them?
So do you mean once they've been placed?
Yeah.
Yeah. So most facilities that are worth their weight have a system that allows a child to see their progress through the system. There might be 4 levels that they need to attain in order to, from beginning to end, or 5 steps perhaps, and they go through those. Those are earned, right? They have to show certain behaviors. They have to demonstrate certain capacities before they move from level 1 to level 2, and so forth, so on and so forth. And that's why there needs to be flexibility in how long a child is in care, because part of that is up to them. Kids don't all move at the exact same pace. They come with a different degree of trauma most times, and so it might take 18 months for one particular youth, where another one may get through in 9 or 10 months. Right, but yeah, there are built-in stages in almost every worthwhile program.
Appreciate it, Cam. Thank you so much for testimony. Other questions? No. Thank you, sir.
Hey,
Appreciate
great.
it again.
Thanks. Nice seeing y'all.
Nice seeing you.
We're gonna get to know each other real well.
Yeah, so we are.
See you in 2 weeks. No. You get 2-week breaks.
I get 2-week breaks.
Enjoy.
Maybe 3.
Yeah, enjoy it.
Next up, we have Nick Griswold, CEO of GrowthWorks. Nick, come on up. When you're ready, sir, make sure the red button is on. I think it still is, so you may proceed when you're ready, sir. Thank you for coming.
Thank you. Okay. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you to Chair Roth, Majority Vice Chair Kelly, Minority Vice Chair Edwards, and the rest of the committee for the opportunity to testify with you today. I'm Nick Griswold. I'm the CEO of GrowthWorks. GrowthWorks is a nonprofit 501c3 behavioral healthcare agency. We're located in Plymouth, Michigan, Western Wayne County, and we've been serving Southeast Michigan since our founding in 1971. I was not there in 71. I've come since then, and I'll explain that. I'm going to move through a few slides. I wanted to bring some data because I think GrowthWorks provides a little bit of a unique perspective on the conversation. I was in the room a couple weeks ago for this hearing, and I think our position is a little different, and so we might offer some different perspective. I wanted to start off by talking about our mission a little bit, and then we act that out through those four core values: passionate dedication, service to others, a commitment to the community, and my favorite, humility, which seems as true now as it ever has been, which is we're always trying to get better at this work. We're always trying to learn, and we're always trying to be better, and the work's always changing, and that's really the challenge. So to give you an update, or an overview, I should say, about how the juvenile justice system works in Wayne County in particular, which is where we do our work, it looks a little different than maybe most other counties around the state. The first two steps of the continuum look very similar with police contact and adjudication, but step 3 is where things look a bit different. So instead of being assigned to a formal probation officer or county employee, the youth that are adjudicated on probation are assigned to 5 nonprofit agencies. GrowthWorks is one of those 5 that distribute, they kind of break up the county geographically by zip code where that kid lives. So in our case, we've been embedded in the communities we serve long before we started doing this work in juvenile justice, and I'll talk about that more. So we have a lot of connections to communities, stakeholders, programs, treatment programs, and I think the key here too is also that GrowthWorks is responsible and accountable, not just to Wayne County, but to all the communities that we serve in Western Wayne County for a youth's care and progress, placement, programming, therapy, safety, community safety, court reporting, and then outcomes up to post 2 years termination from probation services. We really do everything that you can think of that a traditional probation officer does, but a lot more, with a high emphasis on providing treatment opportunities that have a real lasting impact. It wasn't always this way, and I thought you might find this interesting based on our discussion at your last hearing. It wasn't always this way. So in 1999, Wayne County switched to the model that I just described. Prior to that, the Department of Health and Human Services was largely responsible for probation services in Wayne County. And so in the early 2010s, Plant Moran was asked by Wayne County to come in and do a study. It had been, 10, 12 years by that time. How is this system working? And so Wayne County uses that baseline, 1999, and then each year that we all report, the 5 organizations report to Wayne County, that data is compiled and then sort of benchmarked against 99. So the lines I wanted to bring to your attention specifically, line 1, recidivism. If there's a gold bar, a prize at the end of our work, it's that youth don't ever encounter the justice system again. And you can see that in 1999, when the state was largely in control, recidivism rates for youth were anywhere between 38 and 56%, depending how you measure. 2023 is the most current data I have right now, and that number was 3.9% in 2023. Line 4, I'm not going to go through them all, but line 4, which is youth confined in state training schools. Upwards of 731 youth a day in 1999 were confined in state training schools. In 2023, there were 10. And then line 5, sorry, they're not numbered. Placements in other states, which is something I'm going to talk about in a bit. So in 1999, Wayne County youth, there was approximately 200 youth that were placed in facilities outside their home, outside the state of Michigan. And for the last 4 years, that has been 0. And it's now gone to 1, and that was my agency, so I wanted to spend some time talking about that, and I will in just a minute. I wanted to give you just a picture of how of GrowthWorks and what we serve. So our 1/5 approximately of the county is about 100 total youth that we serve. I wanted to classify them by a variety of offenses, just so that you could get a little bit of a picture of the work that we do each day. And so you can see they're pretty evenly distributed amongst those offenses. And I'm not a lawyer, okay? My legal knowledge extends to, I watched a lot of Law and Order episodes in college, and so that's about as far as I can go. But I did classify these into major categories, so this chart was a little more legible. And just to give you an idea, violent offenses, murder to assault with intent to murder, armed robbery, manslaughter. Weapons offenses are CCW, carrying a weapon in school. Property crime are your larcenies, beanies, stolen property. Assault, the only note for assault is it includes domestic violence, which is usually our number one category. If I took all the charges and lined them up, DV is usually our number one. Disorderly conduct, you can imagine there. Traffic offenses, those are not speeding tickets, by the way, and those are driving without a license and other more serious motor vehicle offenses. I bring all this up because, we've been part of juvenile transformation, and the work that's been done the last 2 years around the state of Michigan has largely been very, very good. I think what sometimes gets lost in the dialogue is that the youth justice system, its probation officers, its program providers, leadership, policy advocates, lawmakers, and community organizations like GrowthWorks need to remember that the youth justice system has to serve all of these kids. I think it's easy to and tempting sometimes to grab one of those bars, maybe the top bar or the bottom bar, and start to make platitudes about the entire system, or start to change rules and thoughts and feelings about the system. And the system is, as most things probably at this level is very complicated. It's very interconnected and highly dependent on a lot of independent parts of the system to function properly. I want to talk a bit about GrowthWorks performance real quick. So GrowthWorks has two primary objectives, the way I see it. We coordinate care for the adjudicated youth, and we assist in protecting the community from the adjudicated youth. And so I just wanted to show you, this is a chart last 3 years for us, youth that reoffended while they were under our care at GrowthWorks. We've had 0, knock on wood. And then GrowthWorks post-care performance. So we're responsible for the conduct of those clients 2 years post-termination. That's information that's tracked by Wayne County and the court system in our county. I wanted to show this. So we have kids that are on level 1 probation for the entire time with us that are terminated, and we've had 1 felony conviction out of those 3 years for 2 years out after they're no longer with us. And then for level 2, those are the kids that are placed out of home while they're in their care with us. We have 2. I wanted to talk a bit about, this is a list of all the out-of-home placement providers that we've used since 2023. There are probably a lot of names on this list that you recognize, but there's at least 11 more programs that were providing out-of-home treatment for Wayne County youth in 2019 that are not on this list. And additionally, many of these programs have very long wait lists, often taking months or years, yes, years, for youth to be admitted into programming. One secured treatment facility, I won't name them, their wait list is currently 33 youth as of this morning, with an average detention length of stay, which the previous speaker was discussing. So when there's no bed, there's no availability, there's a wait list, those kids are staying in detention for their safety and for safety of others until they can be transferred to a treatment facility. The average length of stay for detention for those kids on the wait list was 180 days and counting. 2 of the youth on the wait list have over 530 days in detention and counting. The other point I'd like to make is that not all these providers are created equal, and not all the beds are created equal. If we're interested in the true outcomes for children, we need to have programs that specialize in the type of high-quality, evidence-based care that's individually right for them. And that's something that can get lost in the discussion too. I think when we're talking about beds and we talk about total numbers, is it's not just about the number of beds; it's the beds that they serve. And to give you just a quick example, if you look at the list up there, so if through some sort of action with the department or this group, we were able to add 20, 30 secure beds. That would certainly help, but it wouldn't help for any of the kids that are in sex offender treatment programming, for example, or have traumatic brain injury and need specialized programming. And so that can be the rub a little bit, I think, in this work. I'd also like to draw your attention to the one that I starred, the Buckeye Ranch. Now, as you might guess by its name, this is not located in Michigan. If it was, it'd probably be one of the worst business names ever for the state of Michigan. Yeah. This represents the first time in 25 years that our agency has placed a youth in care in an outstate facility. And I wanted to talk a little bit about that. So when we evaluated, about 6 months ago, we started recognizing the fact that there are not enough, there's not enough availability and not enough of the correct facilities, the right facilities to meet demand for what we're seeing just in our little 1/5 of Wayne County, not to mention the other 82 counties across the state. And so we started off at a very deliberative process. And I wanted to mention this because I think it's really important, and I've heard some conversation about how maybe this isn't always a followed practice. So when we evaluated those programs, do they have state licensing? Do they have any violations? Do they have any corrective action plans? Things like in-person site visits. So we went and visited the facility. This facility is outside Columbus. You probably could have guessed that too by the name. And tours, interviews. These are non-negotiables for us. If we're going to place a kid in their care and be responsible for them, then we have to see the facility. We have to talk to kids that are already there, and we have to talk to the staff. Are they members or providers of JJ associations? Are they involved in their statewide community of treatment providers? And is the program operated by a national organization or company? And if so, are there licensing actions or issues in other states? Because this is very much a state-by-state process, these programs. Another thing that we've run into, does the program accept Michigan Medicaid or the client's private insurance? Blue Cross Blue Shield of Michigan and Blue Cross Blue Shield of Illinois, for example, are very completely different and not necessarily in network, depending on where you're being served and what state you are. What are the procedures for medical emergency, things like dental care and stuff? I mean, our agency takes the kid to the dentist, in Michigan. That's usually a pretty easy process, especially if they're Medicaid eligible, receiving those services. It gets a little trickier when you get out of state. And then do they have coverage or availability for clients' current medications if they're on any? And then the last thing, which I think is the most important, honestly, is what's the family impact? Can the family travel to the program? Are they willing to travel? Are they willing to participate in family programming and therapy? At some point, we have to turn these kids back over to their families. And we know that some of the trauma and the challenges that they've experienced have come from those family systems. And so if we're not doing anything to help and support those family systems to improve them, then we're not going to have a very lasting impact on the kid's life. And so can the facility coordinate post-care community services back, when the kid comes back home to Michigan? We take care of that in large part in our organization, and so that's not as big of a concern. But this is the kind of deliberative process that GrowthWorks went through to place our first kid out of state in 25 years. I hope that any agency or department that's evaluating out-of-state providers would use the same or more scrutiny that our agency uses. These children and families deserve nothing less than our very best when it comes to this. I just wanted to conclude my presentation. I'll tell you, honestly, I didn't know anything about this system before I came to GrowthWorks in 2017. I was a central office administrator in a K-12 district in Wayne County for about 10 years before I joined GrowthWorks. What I've come to learn in the 8 years that I've been there is that a lot of communities, schools, and families all across the state count on this system to be at its best, whether they know it or not. And I want to sincerely thank you for having me here today and your attention to this issue. And of course, I'm happy to answer any questions, Chair.
Thank you, Nick. Appreciate it very much. Very helpful. I think some different information you were able to give us there. One thing I would ask is, I guess I have two thoughts. One is when it sounds like you guys do a great job of going into the outside state and making sure that those facilities are in great shape or do the right work. Do you have to report that to the state at all?
Yeah, so through Wayne County and the way that our data system is tracked, the DHHS would know that kid is in a facility that's outside our state.
Okay, and I guess further that, then if you go, you guys inspect it, and you know it's a good facility. They know that the kid's there, but do they know this facility is a good facility?
Yeah, that's a little hard to answer because I'm not sure exactly what they know or wouldn't know. What I do know is that there's things in place, interstate compact, those sorts of things that allow for the information sharing for departments of health and human services across state lines, very much so for this purpose. So I think what is hard to ascertain sometimes is when's the last time that a facility's been visited. That's why we go now. Honestly, if someone hasn't visited the facility since we've emerged from COVID, I don't know that any of that information prior to COVID is even relevant anymore. We're operating so much more differently than we were in 2019, let's say, that if it's been since then, it would definitely be time for a visit.
The other question I had was, there's some different information out there. Can you work with a person over 18 years of age up to 20, 21?
Yeah, so if I'm not the legal expert, but if they come to us and they've committed the offense prior to their 18th birthday, or if they're still in care, then we'll take care of them after their 18th birthday, and the juvenile justice system can still serve them the way it serves other juveniles. That does present, if I can add to that, does present a little bit of a challenge, and I think Representative Beeson might have mentioned this before, but when we've got 18-year-olds and let's say 12-year-olds, in the same system, that can present a real challenge on how and you have to take special care to make sure that those kids are all protected, that the right services are being delivered, and that can be challenging with the older kids, in the system.
Any questions? Beeson?
You said that this is a private company?
GrowthWorks?
Yes.
Yeah, we're a private nonprofit.
It's funny how that works. Yes. So you see some kids that are 14, 12, 16, all have different things coming in, even though it's the same crime. It's just a different way to handle it. Because what a 14-year-old has never been behind a wheel versus I get it. So with that being placed, do you place them by age then too?
Not necessarily. That's definitely a major factor for us. So we're gonna work with a 12, 13-year-old. Unfortunately, we do on occasion get kids that young, and we're gonna work with them completely differently. There's always an emphasis too. By the way, this committee has been talking a lot about bed availability and placements in out-of-home care. That's very important. I just want to also be clear that from our side of things, we work very, very hard to keep kids in the community, in their homes, in their schools, as much as absolutely possible, where it's still safe to do so for really everyone involved. And then if we're not able to keep that person safe in the community, then that's where we need to look for out-of-home care to address specific issues.
Yeah, I checked your stats out. You guys haven't lost that much overall. You have the same medium age, 37, 38. You have the same amount of kids in that area. Even though you lost population, you're holding your stats pretty well. So It's not like you've lost a whole bunch of teenagers that went somewhere else. So
the only thing that's interesting in that slide, and I didn't touch on it, but there's two highlighted. Those are not my highlighted marks, but in the data that you're referring to, there's been a significant increase in diversion youth and prevention youth, right? So kids that are entering the system for very low level offenses that traditionally may have ended up in probation are now ending up in diversion programs. We operate those as well, so we're still seeing those kids kind of regardless, but the work's definitely different.
yeah, if you have a program that works, then you better shove as many kids as through it to get it done. Otherwise, we're going to have to deal with the kids somewhere else.
That's absolutely true, and that's one thing that we've seen. And I would add to that, I think from our point of view, what it's done is it's and starting to, and I think we'll see this continue, is that the kids that maybe typically would have entered probation, we think of, that make a mistake and just need some assistance, and then they'll be back on their way.
Bad decisions. I don't like to say mistakes.
I'm sorry, bad
decision.
decision. That's a fair.
Sometimes
those bad decisions, those kids are getting diverted from the system entirely. So the kids that are left can oftentimes have very serious bad choices that they've made and require very serious care.
Thank you.
Vice Chair Edwards?
Thank you. I understand the purpose and need for such programming, but I'm for proactive and not reactive. So I'm just wondering if you might have any insights on different programs that we can do to keep children in their home and not in the juvenile justice facility. I know you work with them, so you probably had conversations. So I'm wondering what other resources could we do or could we put in place to keep these children in home and not in these kind of facilities?
It's a great question. I think it's the question we're all searching for as the population changes. I don't have the silver bullet answer for you, but what I would say is that I think Wayne County as a whole has taken some steps in this direction. I think what we've tried to do is really beef up our community-based programming. So how can we get these kids the therapeutic support, even for the more serious challenges, but still keep them in their home? And those programs have been hard to find. So, for example, we've started one. We started a equine-assisted experiential learning program with a partner farm that's kind of in northwestern Wayne County. And it may sound like a fun thing to do, but through animals, we're really able to get at the heart of a lot of trauma. And a lot of really powerful professional work can be done in those kind of environments. But that's a good example of that program didn't exist 2 years ago, and us as a more established nonprofit agency had to really come in and start that program. We had to invest in it early. They didn't have things like insurances and 3 years financial statements and all the things that we often have to have in order to access local, state, federal funding. And so we had to be that kind of surrogate to bring those programs to life. So I think that's really, if you're looking for a general answer, I think it's just we need more community-based programming, and we need to find ways to reduce the burden that it takes for really well-meaning micro nonprofit type folks in our communities to be able to step in and do this work.
Great question. Yep, Representative Long John, go ahead.
Late ad.
No, you're
Thank
fine.
you, Chair. Can you say a little bit about how Medicaid dovetails with the work that you're doing, where Medicaid helps kind of keep the program and the institutional flow? How do the programs fit together in your operation?
Yeah, so a fair number of the kids that we serve are on Medicaid services. And so what it allows for us to do is it takes some of the burden off of local government, Wayne County, for example. So Wayne County, we're contracted with Wayne County, if that wasn't clear before. And so, they're providing the funds that we use to take care of all these kids. And so it really helps lessen the load when we can use those Medicaid dollars for those therapeutic services, and I talked about the equine assisted program, but we also have kids that are seeing therapists 2-3 times a week. They may have very advanced substance use disorders that are requiring treatment from specialists. They may be on certain medications. All that plays a big part in making sure that we can have access to that care so that those kids can ultimately get better. It would be really hard to provide that completely on our own in a private setting.
Just because of the way the program works, for every dollar that we put in the state, there's 3 match from the federal under the FMAP equation. So those are smart dollars.
Yes.
Thank you very much. And
Thank you.
Actually, good question. We do have a farm in Antrim County that's doing not the level you are, but similar. So, yeah, thank you, Nick. Appreciate your testimony today.
Thank you, Chair.
Next up, we have Derek McGee, for Executive Director from Spectrum Juvenile Justice Services. Derek, come on up, sir. And when you're ready, make sure that little red button's on so we can hear you. And the folks at home, too.
Good afternoon. Can everyone hear me okay? All right, good. Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate the opportunity to present here today. My name is Derek McCree. I'm the Executive Director for Spectrum Juvenile Justice Services. I've been in the field, like presenter earlier, Mr. Clark, I've been in the field for just short of 32 years, and I've spent the vast majority of my career working for private, nonprofit residential facilities. I also had the privilege of serving the people of the state of Michigan as the State Director of Juvenile Justice. So I sat in that seat for nearly 3 years and then decided to go back to the private sector for reasons that I just wanted to enhance my career and feel like I could be more impactful to service some of the youth in Michigan. So I'll talk a little bit about Spectrum Juvenile Justice and walk through, and then happy to answer any questions that you guys may have of me. So I appreciate the opportunity once again. So Spectrum Juvenile Justice Services has two secure facilities located in Highland Park, Michigan, just outside of the Detroit area. So with that, we have two 80-bed facilities, and the licensing capacity is, I say 80-bed facilities because we have one unit or one building that actually has 90, but we function with 80 beds that operate for treatment. Within those two, we like to call it a functional capacity of about 130. So as Cam said earlier, working in this field for such a long time, there's been a lot of change in the juvenile justice system. So when these facilities were built back in the early 2000, late 90s, the system was significantly different. So you could house 10 juveniles in a facility, and they pretty much primarily had juvenile justice, juvenile delinquency presenting factors. But nowadays, as things have transitioned over the last 20 years or so, there's been a lot more mental health issues present. So when you put 10 youth inside of one pod, it overcrowds and sometimes causes more issues. So we've kind of capped our pods at 8. To Cam's point earlier, I think 6 to 8 is a very functional pod size, and we maintain that with proper staffing. I'm going to put my glasses on so I can make sure I follow myself clearly, so pardon me. Yeah. So within our facilities, as I mentioned, we have two. One is called Calumet Center, the other one's called Lincoln Center. Calumet Center provides services for up to 65 youth in the building. The services that the type of clients we service there are mental health behavior stabilization clients, as well as clients with cognitive impairments. We also have another building called Lincoln Center, and that facility provides services for mental health behavior stabilization, as well as youth with problematic sexual behaviors. We have been in existence since 1976. I've currently been with this organization for just short of 18 months. So I'm just getting grounded in this organization, but again, many years of experience in running and leading nonprofit organizations on the private side sector. The youth that we serve, our age range from around 11 to 20 years old. They would age out at their 21st birthday. We currently have around 101 youth in care of the 130 that I said would be our functional capacity. So we do have room for about 29 youth. So some of the services that we provide within Spectrum Juvenile Justice Services, we have on-site education. So we have a contract with a charter provider that comes in and provides our educational services. We have a partnership with Michigan Rehabilitative Services. They come into our facilities and provide employment education, like how to pursue a job, how to build a resume, how to do things of that nature. Then we also offer them on-the-job opportunities. So they do mostly janitorial work, maintenance type work, things of that nature. So we provide those services with Michigan Rehabilitative Services as a partner. We place a major emphasis on helping youth with social living skill development so that they can build those life skills that are necessary to manage day-to-day life challenges and adverse factors. We have reentry services, so we provide some aftercare. It's mainly tracking individuals after they leave, but we do have services allocated for that. But in addition to that, we bring in outside providers that come in and speak with our youth because we're a secure facility. We don't have a lot of opportunity to take kids outside the facility often. So we often bring in people that have expertise and can help youth with reintegration pieces while in our care. We also provide regular spiritual guidance for our children. We have a partnership with Incarcerated Youth Ministries. So essentially, we have a doctor on staff. We have 2 psychiatrists that come in. We have a psychologist that we have a contract with, 3 nurses in the facility. So essentially, anything that a youth may need inside of our care is offered right inside of our facilities. The only time we really have to take youth out is for specializations. For example, if a kid maybe had an x-ray and needed to get casted or something like that, we would take them outside for those type services, but everything else is offered inside. From our treatment standpoint, we offer individualized treatment for all of our youth. So they're assigned therapists. They have master level therapists that come in. We use an evidence-based model with cognitive behavioral therapy. Also utilize the dialectic behavioral therapy, DBT. So those are the 2 primary models that we use. We use also have group therapy that we offer for individuals. So we specialize those around some of the needs that they have for substance abuse or youth with problematic sexual behaviors. So we bring those groups together to talk about some of the things that they may be facing and encountering. So our ultimate goal with our youth is to get them in and take a look at where they're at, right? So we try to read the child before we read the file, because kids come in with a lot of stipulations and things that precede them that would often have any one of us cast judgment on them. But kids have their own story, so we like to hear their story. We like to take the opportunity to read them, talk to them, get a great understanding of where they're at. Now, we do take the file, and obviously we use that information to help us build treatment plans, but I think it's important that we allow these kids that have these adverse factors to come in and be able to present themselves, and then we can take them from a strength-centered perspective and help them build upon wherever they're at, and then they build their skill set from there. So we spend a lot of time with our kids in individual therapy, just focusing on family relations, their educational gains, their social, emotional control, their abilities to reintegrate and positively interact with their peer groups and go back out into the community and be prepared for, those adverse factors that they often see. Inside of residential, it's very difficult to simulate what happens outside the walls, because we're not able to deal with some of the things that they encounter outside the walls in real time. So we spend a lot of time trying to role play with them, help them with perspectives of understanding, if you do face these encounters, what might you do? We also work with the courts to get them back into the community. We call reintegration passes, so that they can go back out and practice what they've been working on in treatment, work with the family on setting boundaries and roles so that they can function properly within the family. And so when we go back to court in front of the jurist, we're able to give them they can present the competencies that they've gained, they can present themselves, and allow the courts to make the determination on their readiness for de-escalation. One thing about juvenile justice is that youth aren't really sentenced for a determinate length of stay. They're put in our care to meet treatment goals. And when they get through those treatment goals, then and they've achieved the competencies that were outlined in the court, then they're able to go back and present and have themselves ready for potential discharge. So that's a lot of what we do in residential. I have, again, been doing this a very, very long time and wholeheartedly believe in the system of juvenile justice and the treatment. We do have some challenges, and the state of Michigan is under current reform for juvenile justice, and there's a lot of work going on to try to help bring us all together as a state. But in our world, what we do in treatment is that we're not a detention center, we're not a jail, we're not being punitive to kids. We're looking at kids with opportunity to prevent them from entering the adult system. We're looking at them with opportunity to come back into society and function as young adults that are responsible. And that's what we wholeheartedly believe in. And a lot of people are doing great work in this state in the private sector with juvenile justice. So I just wanted to take a couple minutes to educate you on what we do, why we do what we do, and answer any questions that you may have. And I absolutely appreciate the opportunity.
Derek, thank you very much for the presentation. I appreciate it. Couple questions. You do have some secured facility, though, on your site, or none?
We have 2 secure facilities,
okay.
sir. Yes.
Yep.
Both of our facilities are secure.
Okay.
Apologize if I didn't mention that.
No, that's all good. Just want to be clear. And you said you have some space available now for kids?
Yes, sir. We have 101 of our functional capacity of 130, so we have room for about 29 youth.
Okay. Were you asked to take any Schwano kids?
Yes, sir. We have taken some of those youth in. We're in communication with the state regularly, and they are placing them as they're ready per their court to be discharged and released to us.
I didn't ask Nick that. You could thumb up or down, Nick. Oh, thumb up from Nick. He was asked. Yeah, I appreciate that. Any questions from our members? Yep.
Yes, ma'am.
Vice Chair Edwards.
Thank you. I'm sorry. You serve individuals with self-harming behaviors, aggressive behaviors, and suicide ideations too, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Do you give them extra services, or do they have the same services everyone else?
They receive additional services depending on their needs. So sometimes we one-to-one staff them so that they have direct observation throughout the duration of the watch that was identified. We have our psychiatrist they'll order the one-to-one and the level of care that's necessary. We also will, if we need to, we can take them to the emergency room at Children's Hospital in Wayne County for evaluation, and then they would make determinations. 99% of the time, they send them back to our care after the evaluation to be placed in one-on-one supervision.
Does that cost more?
One-to-one supervision? We can charge for that. We often don't, to be honest with you, fill out the paperwork to go through the one-to-one process. We just provide it as necessary, but we can do that, and we sometimes do.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good question. Anybody else? I appreciate it very much.
All right,
Derek,
thank you.
you so much
Appreciate
for
it.
coming forward
Thank you for
today.
your time.
We appreciate it. Just to make sure, I don't think Matthew Wallach or Lauren Skinner made it today. Just want to give them an opportunity if they did. I don't think they made it, so we thank you. There were a couple of things that came out of today's testimony that I did find. We had one of the Schwano kids was released, age 18, needed further services, and were sent back to mom. And just heard from them recently, and they're concerned that this young man's not going to make it at home. So disappointed that a 18-year-old that should get a couple more years of service didn't get it. So but I appreciate our guests that were here today, and I appreciate that gave us more information on things that we're seeking and all the information we need to make sure everything's funded the correct level. So appreciate that. Seeing no absent members today, there will be no further business before the House Subcommittee on Human Services. Have a good vacation.